Story 1, I am the eldest of 3 siblings, and of course, as we moved from house to house, I got the basement bedroom most times. I was fine with this being the eldest, this let me have privacy. The last home I lived in with my family before I moved out on my own, I spent 5 years in the basement bedroom. Through those 5 years, I experienced amazing night terrors and sleep paralysis on a very regular basis. There were a few incidents where I would wake up and the closet on the far side of the room would be open just a crack, and I'd stare at it knowing I had closed it, and it would creak open just a touch more. Then after what would seem like hours, slowly close and click shut. Not a slam, not a regular door close. A very slow, methodical one, if that makes sense. On 2 specific nights, I woke up, not suddenly as something jarred me, but just kind of rolled over and at the foot of my bed saw a girl standing there. She looked very young, with black hair and a dark dress, and she did not move, didn't make a sound, and I never could make out a face. Both times I reverted immediately back to being 5 years old and hid my face under the sheets while my heart rate went full marathon pace. Eventually, I would feel like it wasn't there anymore, and I'd peek out, and it would be gone. My parents are not believers in anything paranormal, and I never told them anything thinking they would think I'm crazy. I chalked it up to night terrors and extraordinarily realistic dreams during paralysis. I moved out and far away. My next sibling in line got the coveted adult room in the basement and life went on. I had a few Christmas visits and other holiday runs, and at one point I remember going into that room to get a chair and seeing the closet door nailed shut from the outside. I didn't question it as I thought there was no way it was related to my experience. Not long after that, on another return visit home, I went and checked the door to that closet. The nails were gone, but in place was a padlock, and there were clearly bundles of sage sweetgrass hanging above the closet and above the only exterior window in. I worked up the nerve to ask my mom, "What's the deal with the basement?" And she reluctantly told me that my brother had seen things come in and out of the closet, and that he had a girl appear beside his bed and terrorize him on several occasions. Now, no joke, I still haven't told them what I saw because I don't want them to have to move or be bothered with their basement over this. They are both retired, all the kids have moved out, and they seem happy. They have also since gutted and renovated the whole basement. I've stayed there a few times now with my wife and nothing has happened. Story 2. I get home from my job as a server at midnight. One of my roommates was in the Navy and was deployed at the time, and the other one was at his girlfriend's house. I cook myself dinner, and as I'm cooking, my dog starts growling and barking in the middle of the room at nothing. This is especially weird because she never, ever barks. She was a rescue, and I bought her as a sense of security when I'm home alone. I'm a female, and I could never get her to bark at anyone. I dismiss her barking as odd, but I finish cooking and eat. I started to clean and turn the sink on because it takes forever to get hot. But right when I turned around, the sink turned off on its own. Again, I think it's odd, but I don't really think it's worth freaking out over. The hair on the back of my dog is standing up straight, but no one was home, and it's midnight, so I figured I'd just tough it out, even though I was beginning to get a little spooked. After cleaning, I go into the bathroom and sit on the sink to pluck my eyebrows. My bathroom was small, with the sink immediately to your right as you enter, with the toilet next to it, a bathtub at the end, and a toilet paper dispenser directly across the toilet. It was a really narrow room, so you could reach the TP while sitting on the toilet. So the way I was sitting, the toilet paper dispenser was behind me. After 2-3 minutes, I hear a weird noise behind me. So I turn around and I shit you not, the whole roll of toilet paper was unraveling fast as fuck, like someone was pulling it. I noped the fuck out of that bathroom. The door was closed and it had no windows, so it couldn't have been a breeze. I put a leash on my dog and ran out of that apartment faster than Usain Bolt. By the time this happened, it was already around 2 a.m. None of my friends were awake, so I spent the night sitting outside of the door to my apartment. When I went back in the next morning, the whole roll of toilet paper was on the ground, and the roll was probably 3-4 full. I'm talking about a good 5-10 meters of toilet paper. After that day, I never had an odd experience quite like that one ever again, but one of my roommates did mention that a few times he'd come home and find every door and cabinet in the place open, when he'd specifically remembered closing them and leaving them that way when he left. This was when I was on vacation out of state, and our other roommate was still deployed. Story 3. Army base, Soest, West Germany, as was. A still dark autumn evening must have been warm because it was the kind of temperature you don't notice. Me, or 13, and a mate, 15, just dossing around before I had to go in. Behind the flats where we live was a green area with a play area. Only one streetlight, so it was very dark compared to our street and the well-lit main route through the camp, which was about 100 meters away from where walking. No traffic, nothing. It was never busy, and this was on a weekend evening, so literally, no traffic and no one out and about as far as we could tell. Which suited 2 teenagers just fine. Thanks. Bear with me. This is important. So we're heading between our respective blocks of flats and into the darkened park area, and we stopped dead. On the main road, moving right to left, was a figure, vaguely person-shaped but undulating and waving like cloth underwater. It glided along the middle of the road. Based on what it obscured behind it as it moved, I'd estimate it to be between 8 to 10 feet. But at the very least, it was larger than average man size. This shape, this thing, was not walking. There was none of the slight up and down motion of walking. It just glided, smoothly, at a fast walking pace, I'd guess, and it was black. Not someone wearing black clothes black. It was a hole cut into the night. No reflections, no shadows or shades. Just blackness. It seemed like a lifetime as I soaked this detail up. In reality, it couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 seconds. I whispered, breathed, "Do you see that?" My friend, in a whisper, replied, "Yes." And the fucking thing changed direction. Towards us. The last image I have, before we broke and ran, was of it rising up as it came over the curb. This is what makes it real for me. This is something that had mass, that obeyed at least something of the physical world. It moved from the brightly lit road into the same darkness in which we stood. We broke and ran for our lives, back onto our street and into my mate's block. The fucker then bolted back to his own home, leaving me wondering how the hell I was going to get to my block. After a while, the fear of the repercussions from my dad for being late overrode my fear of what might be out there in the night. So I ran, eyes straight ahead, the 10 or so meters to my own front door. I was in too much trouble for being late to ever say anything when I got home. Sometimes when I'm walking and the night is warm and still and quiet, I think about it and I wonder what I'd do if I ever saw it again. Run away? Or face it down and maybe solve a 30-year-old mystery? Honestly, I just don't know. Story 4. I've suffered from insomnia as far back as I can remember. I was in 2nd grade and it was really early in the morning, I think around 5 or so. I had a little TV on my nightstand and was definitely watching Low TR on VHS. I had the volume up super loud because my ceiling fan always made a ruckus throughout the night. I was super into the movie when all of a sudden all of the sound around me started to slowly fade away. I remember I became confused and reached to turn my TV up, thinking it had broken. But then I realized the sound of the fan had faded with it. The only way I can describe it is by comparing it to someone turning the volume down on a car radio. I was suddenly overwhelmed by an intense feeling of euphoria. I have never experienced anything like it. I absolutely cannot describe how utterly at peace I felt. I was able to comprehend what was happening, and then it clicked in my head that I was dying. Keep in mind that I'm in 2nd grade, so this is a pretty intense conclusion, but I just knew. I rolled over onto my back, ready to and excited to accept my fate. That was when I saw it. There was a large white figure in my doorway, just hovering and pulsating a white aura. I quickly panicked and began calling out for my brother. His room was across the hall. The figure glided to the end of my bed and just sat there, watching. I'm not really sure how much time passed, but the figure suddenly vanished. The sound came back and the euphoria disappeared. I jumped out of bed and ran into my brother's room, where I practically flew into his bed. He woke up, and when he saw how panicked I was, he began to panic as well. I was hysterical and just kept telling him it was a ghost. We did what any other kids would do, and his under the covers. After a while we got anxious, and I bravely made a peephole hole on the blanket to check the time on the clock, hoping that it would be daylight soon. 5:30, the clock read, 5:30 in the morning. Then the phone rang, and it rang and rang and rang. Me and my brother started to panic even more. Then silence. Once again it began to ring and ring and ring. We jumped out of bed and took turns running from light switch to light switch until we had a light path to the living room. Our house was 5,000 plus square feet. This was not an easy task. We got to the living room and watched cartoons until my mom woke up. She was livid, yelling at us for being up so early. I told her I saw a ghost, which only made her more upset. My brother, who was always tormenting my irrational fears, got mad at her and started telling her this wasn't a joke and it wasn't my imagination. I started telling her to check the phone because I saw the ghost around 5:30, and it must have been the ghost calling. Kid logic. She went to check the phone and went to the other room for a while. Suddenly, she wasn't upset anymore. When we asked if it was said ghost, she said it was a telemarketer. She was so nice about it, she let me sleep. I'm her room the next few days. I thought maybe since it was my brother's birthday that day, she just didn't want to argue. But she never let me sleep in her room. I got home from school on the 15th. I saw the ghost in the early hours on the 13th. My mom called me to the family room and told me to sit in her lap and that she needed to tell me something. I obliged. My great-grandma passed away in the hospital at 5:30 a.m., and the phone calls were my grandma calling to notify us. Me and great-grandma were extremely close. To this day, I get chills thinking about it. I know that there are a few ways to explain the occurrence, but I know for a fact that it was 100% a paranormal experience. My mom and brother still back me up on it today. Story 5. I'm not usually one that believes in the paranormal, but this made me question everything. My girlfriend had always told me her house was haunted. I'd always hear creaks and stuff upstairs and the occasional footstep, but I always played it off as normal house noises until one night in August of this year. We were downstairs watching TV like usual, about to go to bed when we both got a very weird feeling almost simultaneously. She gave me a weird look and I didn't think anything of it, so we went to bed. After a few minutes of her on Twitter and me on Reddit, we put our phones down and roll over to go to sleep. Then we both heard the words, "Good night," in a child's voice. Doesn't seem too strange, right? Well, considering there weren't children in the house, we both looked at each other like, why would you say goodnight like that? Then we realized neither of us had said it, and we left her room fairly quickly. We went downstairs to lay on the couch and watch a little TV and come to our senses and figure out where those words could have come from. Then we both got that someone's watching your feelings. Not like, oh, that dude over there has been staring at me. But something will not take their eyes off me no matter what I do feeling. So we decided it best to leave the house. We went to walk out the front door, but right as we were about to open it, we heard the child's voice again. This time it came from the balcony right above us in the entryway. Clear as a day, a child said, "Mommy and Daddy." We looked at each other. I may or may not have screamed, and we ran to my car and decided to drive to the one place that was open in our shitty small Oregon town, Walmart. The problem was, as soon as we got in the car, we knew something had come with us, and it was pissed at us for leaving. The second we got into my Honda, there was nothing but the feeling of hate instilled into both of us for no reason whatsoever. Whatever it was, filled that car with hate. It's now about 4 a.m. and I have to be at work in 5 hours, so we decide to go back to her house and try to get some sleep and see what happens. We walk into the front door, and nothing but quiet. We walk up the stairs, turn right, and suddenly it sounds like a dog is growling from her upstairs bathroom. It takes me a second though, because I grew up with dogs, and all I could think was that it was just mine and they're being weird. 5 seconds later, I realize I'm at her house and no dog has ever set a paw in there. Something was fucking growling at me, and I had no idea what. At this point, I'm fucking pissed at whatever is happening because I'm tired and need to sleep for work. So I come up with this brilliant plan of talking to shit to whatever causing all these problems. The only thing that sticks out at this point is me yelling, "If you're so pissed, do something about it." Right after that, I felt something pull my shirt. I turn around thinking my girlfriend is playing a very unfunny joke on me, but no. She was still downstairs. Something pulled my shirt. After that, I decided it was time to leave for the night. At 6 a.m., we get in my car and drive to my mom's house. That car ride was much less hate-filled and all the bad feelings were gone for a while. I went to work while my girlfriend slept at my mom's place, and when I got off, we went back to her house to check things. Everything seemed fine except for the one picture of us she had hanging on her wall was knocked to the ground like something out of a fucking horror movie. But she was too exhausted to care about my safety at that point, and I was so tired, I was willing to let whatever was there kill just so I could get some rest. 2 weeks later, we moved out and haven't had any problems since. I never believed in the paranormal at all until this happened. I still question it. My brain thinks there has to be a logical explanation to all of it. And I'm sure there is, but I know she believes, and a piece of me believes that there's something else in that house. Story 6. A few years ago, I moved into an old bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. This was the first time I had moved into my own place, and it was nice to not have crappy stealing roommates. The apartment block, which only had 8 units, was built in the 1930s. It was moldy, and the rent was interestingly cheap. The first few months go by without a hic, and I'm enjoying living in this place. I come home from work one day and I go into my bathroom. Something catches the corner of my vision. The board that covers the manhole on the ceiling, that has access to the small attic space, is broken into 2 pieces on the ground. I remember standing there for about 2 minutes trying to make sense of it. I examine the 2 broken bits of wood. The wooden board is about an inch thick and would have taken Bruce Lee to break it in half. My initial thought is that the landlord may have sent an electrician around without informing me, and they may have been working in the attic space and broken the board, if that makes sense. But the more I think about it, the less likely that scenario seems. Anyway, I take a couple of pictures and email them to the landlord asking if anyone was in the property that day, with an undertone of me being a bit pissed off that she didn't tell me. I receive a reply at around 7:30 a.m. the next morning. Her email reads, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." I was worried, thinking, shit, someone has broken in. I called her and she explained that her last 2 tenants said the exact same thing happened to them, amongst other things, and she will send someone around to replace the wooden board. If I wasn't so busy with work, I would have thought more of it. I lay awake at night for the next few weeks thinking, what the fuck caused the board to break in half, and my first conclusion is that someone was living up there in the tiny attic space of this apartment, which seemed very unlikely. About a month later, I woke up suddenly around 4 a.m., which is very unusual. I have so many goosebumps it feels like someone is rubbing their hands on me. Everything is silent for ages, but then I hear this weird sound coming from the roof above my bed. It's this dragging sound, like someone is pulling a sack of potatoes along the floor. I freak the fuck out, and I'm frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I think. There's no way a possum would make that sound. After about 5 minutes of listening to this intermittent dragging sound, I work up enough courage to turn on the light and walk into the bathroom where the manhole is, armed with the cricket bat I keep next to my bed. The new board covering the manhole is broken into 2 pieces again. I felt sick. I turn on the bathroom light and stare at the black space where the cover on the manhole would be. As tough as I like to think I am, I'm 100% frozen with fear. The dragging sound has stopped, but there's another sound. There's a whispering. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me at first, but the whispering was clear. It was coming from the fucking attic. Please let me stress at this point that I'm not making any of this up. The whispering sounds like children's voices. It's gibberish mostly, but there's one sentence that I can make out. It's your turn. It's your turn. It keeps repeating. I turn on every single light in the apartment as well as the TV to try and make things feel normal. It's about 5 a.m., and it's still dark outside because it's the middle of winter. I'm watching TV to try and unwind. Then the fuse blows, and everything goes silent. My pet Budgie in my kitchen, who never makes a sound at nighttime, starts squawking like he's being strangled. I've never heard him make these sorts of noises. He's literally screaming. I grab my car keys and run the fuck out of my apartment and go sit in my car. I wait until the sun comes up. People are now walking their dogs and starting their day, and this comforts me enough to go back into my apartment. The front door is open, but I don't think too much of it because I figured I booked it out of there so fast that I didn't close it. Everything seems normal, and I go into the kitchen to check on Dexter, my pet Budgie. He's not in his cage. What the fuck? I let him out most days to fly around, but there is 100% no way of his getting out unless someone lets him out. I start to feel sick again. I look around everywhere but can't see him. All the windows are closed and the wire mesh screen door at the front door was closed when I came up. I open the door to the bathroom. Again. I open the door to the bathroom and I can hear a splashing sound. Poor little Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I take him out, wash him and dry him off. I thought he was going to die because he was breathing in water. I was so confused. The only logical explanation is that someone did this. At about 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of what had happened. "Oh wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I only moved out 3 months ago. I heard the whispering again on a few occasions, and twice the manhole cover moved but wasn't broken. The landlord called me last week. She sounded embarrassed and said that the new tenants, a young Japanese couple, had begged to speak with me about some of the shit that has been going on there. Screw that. It's their problem now. Story 7. One night when I was 10, I was asleep in bed and was woken up by my bedroom door opening, then someone sitting on my bed. I felt the graze on my leg and the bed sink as they sat. Thinking it was my mom had something to tell me, I opened my eyes only to see a pale, eyeless, just black empty sockets boy, who seemed to be my age, sitting at the foot of my bed with his legs crossed, staring at me, or facing my direction since he had no eyes. He then reached his hand toward me and he was holding what looked like a little black box. I was freaked out, but as I reached to grab it, he hesitantly pulled back. I reached out further for it and said, "Give it." As I did so, I blinked, and by the time I reopened my eyes, he was gone. The spot of the bed where was sitting lifted back into place, but the imprint of someone sitting there was still present. I told my mom in the morning, and she was slightly freaked but assured me I was just dreaming. Fast forward 5 years. I had my girlfriend over to do homework. After homework, she took a nap while she waited for her parents to pick her up. When they arrived, I tried waking her to let her know. I nudged her, and she opened her eyes so suddenly, already looking in the direction of the corner of the room, where the wall meets the ceiling, lifting her finger and pointing. And as fast as she woke, she fell asleep again. I attempted to wake her again. She came to full consciousness, and I asked her what the hell that was about, and explained what she just did. She said, "Oh, I thought I was dreaming, but up on the wall I saw a little boy with no eyes just there in a Spider-Man pose staring at me." That's when I freaked out and told her the story for the first time, of when I saw what I guessed was the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years, still with the same girlfriend, and by this time we had a 2-year-old daughter. We were living in my old bedroom at my parents' house. My daughter would wake up at the same time, every night, and start talking. For a while, we thought it was a normal baby thing until I noticed it was almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her one night who she was talking to every night. She responded, "A little boy, he talks to me, he's nice, he's lost and looking for his mommy." I told my mom what happened the next morning, and before I got to tell her what I thought, she said, "I remember when that happened to you, then your girlfriend?" I have no idea what that is. By then, neither my girlfriend nor I have seen the little boy after our first encounter, but my daughter continued her nightly conversations until we got our own place later that year. Story 8. This was several years ago when I was a total deadbeat and lived with my then-girlfriend's parents. They had a tri-level house, with a basement that contained our living space and my girlfriend and I's bedroom. Upstairs was the living space for everyone else, the dining room, and the kitchen. The third level had the master bedroom and 2 additional bedrooms for my girlfriend's sisters. I was home alone one night, with her parents off with friends. My girlfriend at a friend's and her sisters were at an all-night church thing. I elected to stay home and play WoW all night. Where my computer and desk sat, right above my head, was an AC vent. Often I could hear her sister playing in her room from that vent. I was leveling my paladin or something when I heard laughing and giggling coming from the vent. Nobody was supposed to be home, so my heart picked up. I glanced at the clock on my computer, and it read 1:36 a.m. I remember this all very distinctly. I went to go investigate and headed upstairs. The way the landing sits is at the top of those stairs. You can turn left and either go upstairs or go into the kitchen. I climbed the second set of stairs and opened the first door on the left, which was her young sister's room, which is directly above the basement. Inside, I used the light of my phone to illuminate as best I could. I saw a small figure, what I assumed was a small girl wrapped in a white sheet in the center of the room. Cue pants shitting, this young girl stops playing with the dolls and slowly looks at me. It let out the most ear-shattering scream you can imagine. My skin crawls just thinking about it and my chest tightens just remembering it. I wish I could tell you what transpired, but I remember waking up at the bottom of the landing, right next to the door of the kitchen. I stumbled into the kitchen to get a drink of water and contemplate what the fuck just happened. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. The clock read 4:46 a.m. We never found the sheet the next day. but the dolls the figure was playing with were sitting in the middle of the room, away from the toy chest which they were inside that afternoon when she cleaned her room, which is across the room.
The end. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.